Hi. So this is pretty cool. It's my first time in Argentina, so thank you, Hernan, and everyone, too many people to list, for flying me here. Talk. Yeah. Oh, hi. That is loud. Okay. So yeah, this is really cool, and thank you very much. Oh, come on, work. There we go. Ah, darn it. Ah, I knew I'd screw this up. Just a second. There we go. Quick disclaimer, I'm basing a lot of this talk on my own personal experiences and the feedback I've gotten from my own work and the work I publish. So as with anything, your mileage may vary, and there are exceptions to every rule. I've often found that I gain the most knowledge when I listen to talks, when they talk about their own personal experiences. So that's what I am going to do. Be warned. I will be talking about myself a lot. So, be prepared for that. Oh my God, why won't this work? Sorry. Okay. Speaking of myself, who am I? I am a native New Yorker. I've grew up in New York State. I've lived in the New York City area for almost 20 years. Before I got into game design, I was a former 9-to-5 guy working in the garment center, handling shipping. It was very, very boring. I got sick of that. And in 2006, I started Wadjet Eye Games, where I decided I liked making adventure games, and I thought to myself, I'm going to try making them for a living. And I've been doing it ever since. And in 2009, I was joined by my wife, Janet. And in 2013, I was joined by my daughter, Eve, who has not learned to code yet, but we're working on it. Since then, we have launched 15 games, 16 as of 3 weeks ago. We are known for the Blackwell series. Our first game was called the Shivah, which is a murder mystery starring a rabbi. We have published several games, Gemini Rue, Primordia, Techno Babylon, and most recently, Unavowed. And for the last year, so Unavowed was an idea that had been in my head for several years before I started working on it. It was first inspired by the words of a former BioWare writer named Jennifer Hepler. And the text here is paraphrased a bit, but she made the point that in a lot of games, you can skip the cutscenes and the narrative stuff to get back into the combat and the action-oriented stuff. And what she wanted was the exact opposite. She wanted to skip the combat and get back to the juicy narrative stuff. Things like the fighting and the tactics and the min-maxing of gear, that just got in the way. Why is all these shooting elements in my Blue Alien simulator, is what people would say about Mass Effect. It was a slog. It took up too much time, wasn't enjoyable. And sadly, Jennifer got a lot of flack for expressing this view. I'm not going to get into that here. But her words always resonated with me because I really agreed with them. Jennifer worked on Dragon Age Origins, among others, and like Jen, this was a huge inspiration for me. And the meat of these games was the narrative, the characters, the branching dialogues, the choice and consequence, choosing which companion character to bone. These were the heart and soul of the experiences. And like Jen, this is the game I wanted to play. So my thoughts have been, well, why isn't anyone making this game? And then later I thought, well, why not make that game? Why not make a game where this stuff is the heart of the experience? So I kept putting it off. Whoops. Hello? I'm being waved at, and I don't know why. Okay. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. That's why. Sorry. I knew I'd screw this up. Gotta turn this back on. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. I am such a pro. All right, now it's not working. There we go. I kept putting it off because it was really ambitious. And then a few years later, I met Jen at the Game Developer Conference in San Francisco. And we started talking, and it turned out we knew each other. We were old friends. We went to summer camp together when we were 13. We hung out at each other's houses. And, it had been like 20 years, and she changed her name, and, we all change. But I had been following her career for years, and I didn't recognize her. I took it as this very serendipitous thing. If I was looking for a heavenly sign that it was time to make this game, then this was it. It was time to make this game of my dreams, which I called Unavowed. And I was in a very good position to do this. I had spent about 10 years making these games. I made 15 of them, or I had designed or published 15 of them. I built a great foundation of knowledge and experience, and when was there going to be a better time? So I already had my title and my setting. It was going to be a dark urban fantasy set in New York City. You write what you know, inspired by things like the Dresden Files and World of Darkness and Hellblazer. These are all things I love, and I was super psyched to make this game. So I sat down and I started. I was really psyched. Let's do this. And thus began the worst battle with writer's block that I had ever fought in my entire life. I had never been so blocked and so stuck. There was progress, but it was agonizingly slow. And it really did a number on my self-esteem for a long while. At first, I thought this was only due to the large scope of the project. Like the BioWare games I was inspired by, you have access to 5 companion characters. Those of you who have played the game, one of them was cut, so don't be confused. You have access to 5 of them, of which you can choose 2 to go out with you on various missions. But rather than give you tactics in combat, different tactics in combat situations, they would give you different solutions to solving the puzzles in the game world. For example, this guy, Logan, can talk to ghosts, and the ghosts will often give you extra background details, which could, for example, be used to gain a favor with an NPC or get you into somewhere that you couldn't before. And this character, Eli, can set shit on fire. So designing for all these different scenarios takes time, and the game could not be short as a result. Otherwise, the player could not take full advantage of this choose your party mechanic. And this alone made this a much more challenging project to work on than I was used to. But my problem went a little deeper than this. It was like 2 different parts of me were fighting each other. And I pretentiously call this the battle between my instincts and my experience. I finally get to the point. Instincts, of course, are the gut feelings. Something feels right or wrong, but you can't really describe how or why you feel that way. It's just instinct. You just do. You just feel it. And that's very hard to quantify. Experience is the knowledge you gain by doing something a lot. You do a thing, it works or it doesn't, you get feedback, you learn, you do better. The skills, the theories, the learned behavior, the leveling up, as it were. And ideally, instinct and experience work like this, hand in hand. They work together. Instinct will tell you that something isn't working. You use your experience to think about it and figure out why and how to fix it. Or on the flip side, instinct will tell you that something really works, that it's really great, but your experience will help you make that happen. It's not enough to have a good idea. You have to know how to make it happen. But for me, this often feels like this. That there's a bare-knuckle, drag-out fight going on in my creative process. And with every bit of design I'd put on paper, I'd come out the other side feeling like I just ran a marathon. It was exhausting. This is all very esoteric, and sometimes the things merge, but this is often how I visualized it. And from the very beginning of production, I knew that I wanted to focus on immersion and exploration. I wanted the act of discovery to be rewarding. In most of my previous work, for those of you who have played, you often discovered new things merely by someone telling you the thing. And I wanted to take some steps towards changing that. So here's one of my early pieces of placeholder art. This is from the very first mission of the game, after you've been recruited into the secret organization called the Unavowed. You and your two companion characters are looking into strange goings-on in the East Village of New York, which is my old neighborhood. And this room is the basement of an abandoned building. I mean, obviously. And I knew you'd encounter a sacrificial altar, a dead body on the floor, and a ghost hovering over the body. And as I was working on this image, my instinct kind of took over. My instincts told me that this was a bit boring. I wanted to make it more visually interesting. And just sort of out of nowhere, from that ethereal place where ideas come from, came the thought, why not make the basement half forest? As the result of this magic that's being performed there. It's this healing life magic. So my thought was it creates excess life, which means plants and trees and things like that. Again, this thought came out of nowhere, pure instinct. So I went with it. I went back to the drawing board and I added a forest. If only I could get away with using art like this for real, life would be so much simpler. Anyway, here is the final image once I was happy with everything. And I think this is pretty cool. You know, my instincts were pretty spot on in this case. I think it's really nice. But when all the elements were in the game, my experience kind of reared up again and told me that this was wrong, that there was just too much going on. I'm asking the player to process 3 massive things at the same time. Number one, that the basement's half forest. That's a big deal. Number 2, there's a dead body on the floor, and holy crap, there's a friggin' ghost. This is a 2D game, so I can't really direct the player's point of view like I could in a 3D game. It's all up on the screen at once. You're not really discovering this. It's just all thrown up at you all at once. So I wanted the act of discovery to be rewarding. And I knew this would be very overwhelming to players just coming into the room for the first time. This is what my experience taught me would probably happen, and I knew I needed to take steps to fix this. So my instincts wanted this awesome, cool location, but my experience was the strict teacher telling me no. And this was agonizing. I had to get these two sides of myself working together. So again, I had to take a few steps back and try to remember what my goals were. I wanted the players to feel rewarded for discovering this themselves, and that wasn't happening. It was being discovered for you. So I needed to slow things down and enable the player to discover and process this stuff on their own. First was the dead body. That was easy. I threw a blanket over it. It stands out, but not immediately. It requires the player to explore the scene a bit with their eyes before they see it. Then they remove the, hold on a second. Then they remove the blanket, and it's like, oh no, dead body. So that was easy. But the ghost was slightly trickier. The issue wasn't that there was a ghost in the room. The issue was that this is the first time in the game that you ever encountered a ghost. So right after being confronted by all this visual stuff, the forest, the dead body, now you got to learn about ghosts and how they work. And this is lots of new information being piled up on top of new information. And this was just overwhelming. Again, my experience taught me this was going to be overwhelming to people. I needed to fix this. So the fix to this was introduce the ghost in another room of this building. So you're free of all new major distractions here. You've been to this room several times at this point, so you can absorb this new development pretty easily. So that when you go down to the basement and encounter the ghost, it's something you've already digested, and so you're not choking on it, to use a really bad metaphor. And I also wanted to give the player to work a bit to discover the forest. So I turned the lights off. And you need to use Eli's fire magic to bring in a bit of light, which reveals a fuse box that you need to fix to turn the lights on. And I added a bit of lore to explain this. I totally created lore to justify a design decision, and this happens more often than you'd think. So yay! After weeks and weeks and possibly months of just tearing my hair out, I managed to get both sides working together, hand in hand, and the results were pretty good. I was very happy with how this turned out. The testers really liked how it turned out. So it ended pretty happily. But that doesn't always happen. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to focus more on immersion and exploration. I wanted to feel like you were exploring a place instead of just exploring a background image. In most of my previous games, this is from Blackwell Convergence. I don't know how many of you have played it. In most of my previous games, you navigated the world by clicking icons on a map screen. And I decided that was very immersion breaking. I wanted you to explore a place, not just click items on a map screen. So I decided very early, no map screens. Except for this one. Unavowed takes place within all 5 boroughs of New York City. And in order to get to these boroughs, you need a map screen on the subway. So that was unavoidable. But once you're in a hub area, you explore them all by going from point A to point B with no interruptions or fancy transitions. And this made things a little bit difficult for me. One thing experience has taught me over the years is to keep things very efficient and very tight. I really do not like padding. Nothing makes me grind my teeth more than when a game deliberately wastes my time with lots of unnecessary dialogue or long stretches of space you have to walk through. I value my time, so I try to incorporate that in my work. But at the same time, I wanted you to walk from point A to point B. So I spent a lot of time designing each area to be as walk-friendly as possible. Here's a quick sketch. Oh my God, I am behind. I'm sorry. Yes, here we go. Here's a quick sketch of the Staten Island map, one of the hub areas in the game. And each square represents one background, just one room to walk through. And I kept it pretty tight. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screens. Yeah, 8 screens here, and that's it. I kept it very tight. And I'm especially proud of this location here, because you can access 3 locations from one background. Very proud of this, very efficient map. I made sure there was something relevant on every single screen. No padding, very tight. Everything was great, I loved it. Until I started putting together the characters and scenarios and dialogue for this screen here, the police station exterior. Here you need to speak to a police captain whose name is Joy Harrison, and I wanted to save on the amount of backgrounds that you had to walk through. So I figured I put her outside the police station. Why bother walking in? That's just another room. Have her outside and you can talk to her there. This was what my experience taught me was the best thing to do. But for some reason, I could not get into this character's head. I just couldn't write her dialogue. Something wasn't gelling. Like my instincts just kept stopping me. Like I would avoid working on this character because I just couldn't get there. Something was like rearing its ugly head and telling me something is wrong. It was this ugly feeling in my stomach, and I couldn't really continue until I figured out why that was happening. And it took days and again weeks and more time than I should have of trying and butting my head against walls before I realized the problem. I couldn't get into Joy Harrison's head because I didn't know why she was outside. My experience taught me that it was better to have her outside. It was efficient. Don't waste the player's time. It ticked all the right boxes on the list of the right way to make a game. But my instincts were telling me again that this was wrong. So the obvious thing to do would be to just add, excuse me, would be to enable the player to go inside the police station, and you can talk to Joy Harrison there. But I resisted this for longer than I should have, because if I did that, then I would be left with this completely pointless background, and just hanging there on the map, flabby and useless like a third arm, just a buffer between one room and the next, and not interesting at all, nothing there. And this went against everything I had learned about good design. And back when I used map screens, this wouldn't have been a problem. You just click on the icon and you're in the police station. Bam, efficient. But now I had a problem. I had to deal with this new paradigm that I self-imposed upon myself. And I agonized over this. This seems crazy, but I kept trying to think of justifications to keep her outside. Maybe she's on a smoke break, maybe she's drinking coffee, maybe she's on her phone. I rejected all of them because none of them helped me get into her head. I needed to know what she was doing and why. And eventually I settled, all right, maybe she's waiting for the bus, and went so far as to add the bus stop and put her in the bus stop. And that didn't work either. And then I realized this was stupid. Like, I need to just move forward. But I realized the problem is that having her on the street removed her authority. A lot of the story and her character hinges on her being a very authoritative figure, in command, in control. And having her hang outside just removed a lot of that. And so she needed to be in a position where she reflected that power. So there was no way around it. I bit the bullet, added one more location, and put her inside. And it worked. And I could envision her at her desk, surrounded by mountains of paperwork, angry, and it enabled me to get into her head a lot more quickly. And then within a day or two, I had the entire scene written. Bam, done. So I wasted a lot of time there. But I still had this empty friggin' background, and it bothered me. I just couldn't let this go. I couldn't let this just hang out there and be useless. So I created another character and put him in there to make it a bit more interesting and not totally pointless. And ironically enough, this character, whose name is Donnie, ended up being one of my favorite characters in the game. So that all ended up okay. Just kind of a happy accident. So these two scenes, the basement and the police station, were just two examples out of many. And telling you about them didn't take very long. But experiencing them and dealing with them took up weeks and weeks and months of my time. It was a slow, painful process. In fact, it was so painful. Funny story, I was recently going through my old design notes for Unavowed, and I found, just in the middle of my design notebook, a 3-page long angry rant just full of self-hatred and anger, like, you can't do this is all crazy, this is all falling apart. And I don't remember writing this, but I was really angry at myself. And it's this process that I go through, and everyone goes through. And sometimes, of course, you got to ask yourself, I ask myself all the time, was this worth it? Because in the old days, when I first started, before I had all this experience, I wouldn't have really done this. I would have just maybe felt a little tinge, but then I would have just gone through, barreled through, got it done. The advantage to that would have been that I would have gotten the game out a lot faster, but instead I wasted weeks, months at a time trying to make this work, trying to make both my instincts and my experience, my gut and my brain, happy. And the game came out a few weeks ago and seems to be doing very well. People seem to like it, and they don't know the hell I went through. And many folks still say it sucks anyway. I'm sure we've all gone through that. But if my experience has taught me anything at all, it's that when I'm happy with my work, then the players and the folks playing it are usually happy too. So at the end of the day, that makes it all worth it. And thank you very much.